Hi, sixth graders. Welcome to the fourth quarter. It's the last one, so be patient. And I hope you're going to like this story. It's called Bellerophon and the Flying Horse, retold by Pamela Oldfield. Once long ago, a young man named Bellerophon was staying with the king of Argus. The king's wife was impressed by Bellerophon and said as much to her husband. She talked about him so much that the king grew tired of listening to her. All you talk about is Bellerophon, he grumbled. Try to think about something different for a change. The boy is far too young to be a hero. His foolish wife took no notice. Day after day she told the king how handsome Bellerophon was, how clever and how brave. At last the king grew so jealous that he decided to get rid of Bellerophon, but without telling his wife. He handed Bellerophon a sealed letter and asked him to deliver it to the king of Lycia. This is a most important letter, he told Bellerophon. Be sure you give it to him. Bellerophon agreed to deliver the letter and set off at once. He soon reached Lycia and met the king. The two of them got on well right from the start. The king entertained him so lavishly that it was several days before Bellerophon remembered the letter. Forgive me, your majesty, he said. I was asked to give you this. The king opened the letter. As he read it, he turned quite pale. Whatever is the matter? Asked Bellerophon. Is it bad news? The king made no answer, but began to mutter to himself. This is a treachery, he whispered. I cannot believe it. Then he looked up at Bellerophon. Never ask me about this letter, he commanded, and threw it straight on the fire. That night, when Bellerophon went to bed, he wondered about what was in the letter, but he was tired and soon fell asleep. The king, however, could not sleep. The letter had given him a terrible shock. It said that Bellerophon was a wicked young man and asked the king to have him killed. How could I do such a thing? Murmured the king. Bellerophon seems such a pleasant young man, and he is a guest in my house. The king of Argus is known for his hot temper, and he may soon regret this rash decision. He paced up and down until at last he had an idea. I shall send Bellerophon to slay the Chimera, he decided. He may well die in the attempt, but if he succeeds, even the king of Argus will have to admit that he is a true hero. So the next day the king told Bellerophon about the ferocious monster that was causing distress to the people of his kingdom, and begged him to do something about it. The Chimera is ruining their lives, said the king. I implore you to destroy it for me. You will find it over in the hills where the sun rises. Bellerophon was rather puzzled by all this, but he agreed to go. He walked for many miles without seeing a sign of the monster and eventually stopped to ask an old farmer if he was going in the right direction. When Bellerophon mentioned what he was looking for, the old man's eyes widened in alarm. Stay away from the Chimera, he warned Bellerophon. It's the vilest creature ever born. Plenty of young men have tried to kill it, but they have all died in the attempt. Perhaps I will have better luck, said Bellerophon hopefully. The old farmer shook his head. Young people today just will not listen to reason, he grumbled. But if you are determined to get yourself killed, take that path through the woods. It will lead you to the Chimera. Bellerophon thanked the farmer politely and went on his way. trying not to be alarmed by what he had been told. He was not looking forward to fighting the Chimera, but if he turned back without even trying, he would be called a coward. An hour later, he sat down to rest, and to his astonishment, a beautiful woman appeared before him. I am Athena, goddess of wisdom, she told him. I know your plan to fight the Chimera, and I will help you. She held out a bridle, and as Bellerophon took it from her, she smiled at him and vanished. How odd, thought Bellerophon, staring at the bridle. What possible use could a bridle be when I have no horse? The bridle was the finest white leather studded with gold and decorated with precious jewels. I shall take it with me, he said, and went on his way, puzzling over the strange gift. What Bellerophon did not notice was that far above him, Pegasus, the winged horse of the gods, was wheeling and prancing among the clouds. Suddenly, the snow-white horse flew down the earth to drink at a spring of pure water. Bellerophon was overjoyed when he saw the graceful creature before him. Now he knew why Athena had given him the bridle. He approached the horse slowly, speaking softly to reassure him. I know you are Pegasus, he said. You are always ridden by the gods. I am not a god, but Athena has given me this bridle, and I must ride you when I go to fight the dreadful Chimera. Pegasus nodded his head as if he understood, but just as Bellerophon reached out to touch him, the horse sprang into the air and out of reach. For a moment, Bellerophon thought the horse would fly away, but then he came down again to drink. Eventually, Bellerophon gave up his attempt to catch the horse. He put down the bridle and stood by, quietly observing. Pegasus was a fine animal with hoofs and wings of silver and a flowing mane and tail. Suddenly, Bellerophon ran forward, jumped onto the horse's back, and clung to its mane. The horse tried every trick he knew to throw off his unwanted rider. He flew up into the air and swooped down again, but somehow Bellerophon managed to stay on its back. At last, Pegasus flew down to land beside the spring once more. Bellerophon guessed that now Pegasus would wear the bridle, and he slipped it over the horse's head. Then he sprang once more onto the horse's back. Take me to the Chimera, he cried, and Pegasus leaped upward, tossing his head with excitement. They flew for many miles until, at last, they came to a valley where the grass and trees were trampled and broken. Far below them, a village lay in ruins. From the dark hills beyond the valley, they heard a thunderous rumbling roar. That must be the Chimera, whispered Bellerophon. He leaned forward and reassuringly patted the horse's neck, but his own heart beat faster as the thought of what was to come. Pegasus showed no fear, but flew on toward the rumbling sound. Soon they were confronted by a horrible sight. The Chimera rose up before them. This was no ordinary beast. The monster had 3 heads. One head roared. It was the head of a lion. The second head hissed. It was the head of a giant snake. The third and the last head bleated like a goat and had 2 sharp horns. Bellerophon was terrified. He almost wished he could turn back, but then he remembered Athena. She had sent Pegasus to help Bellerophon, and that made him feel much braver. "Death to the cruel chimera!" he shouted, and drew out his sword. The lion's head reached out toward him, its mouth ready to swallow him up, but the winged horse darted sideways, and Bellerophon cut off the head with one mighty blow. The chimera's rage was frightful. The snake's head longed at Bellerophon, hissing loudly, but down came the sword. Chop! And away rolled the snake's head. "Two heads gone and one to go," shouted Bellerophon. But the chimera was not going to be beaten quite so easily. Without warning, it reared up on its hind legs and reached out with its fearsome claws. They sank into the winged horse, who whined with pain. Silver feathers floated down, and the beautiful white mane was suddenly speckled with blood. The sight of the horse's blood made Bellerophon forget his own fear. Without a thought for his own safety, he slashed again and again at the goat's head until that too lay bleeding on the ground. Now the chimera had lost all three of its heads, and it collapsed in a heap. Bellerophon waited, his sword at the ready, but the chimera would rise no more. A great cry went up as the people ran from their hiding places in the ruined village. "The chimera is dead!" they cried, cheering and waving as Pegasus and Bellerophon flew skyward once more. They watched the young man and the horse as they rose higher and higher and disappeared at last among the rolling clouds. The grateful people then set about rebuilding their village and replanting their crops. The memory of the beautiful white horse and its valiant rider would live on in their hearts forever. Bellerophon had escaped death, and no one could now doubt that he was indeed a hero. The end. Oh, I hope you liked it. It's a very good story. Bye.